Good morning, Pathlight Thrive Hive. Good morning if you are joining us live, and also hello if you're joining at a later date, watching on YouTube or watching on Pathlight Thrive Hive. For those who are on YouTube and you don't know about the Facebook group, it is a free Facebook group called Pathlight Thrive Hive, where we discuss things around mental health and personal development, holistic well-being, navigating life's challenges, such as the pandemic. That's why we set it up originally. But also, we're just here to support folk and enlighten and connect and bring lots of interesting topics and special guests. We also have various connecting activities going on, like book clubs and singer-size and other stuff from time to time. So feel free to join us if you're not already a member. So good morning if you're joining us live. And today's special guest is Llana Mauree Collie, who's joining us from Australia, hence the rather unusual time of 9 a.m. rather than our usual slot of 8 p.m. So thanks for being here. Llana's going to be speaking about the suicide of her brother. So trigger warning, there are going to be some discussions which you may find disturbing. So do feel free to turn off or shield impressionable ears as you see fit. And if you have any questions for Llana or any comments as we go along, then feel free to share those with us. If you want, you can go down to this little link, streamyard.com/Facebook. If you do that, then when you submit your comment, we'll know who it is. That's not a problem. And if you are enjoying the hive, then please, there we go. Feel free to support what goes on here. You can help to make it sustainable by donating £3 anytime you like, or by subscribing for £7 a month. And you can do either of those things at buymeacoffee.com/thrivehive. And finally, if you have anyone else that you feel would benefit from what goes on here, anyone who would like to connect with us and join in with our chats and group activities, then feel free to invite people in directly or just share the group link on your Facebook and LinkedIn and whatever other profiles you want to do. So it's facebook.com/groups/PathlightThriveHive. Okay, thank you very much. So hope you win cricket match later. Thank you very much. I hope so too. First comment of the day. Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, so without further ado, let's bring Llana in. Good morning, Llana, and thank you for being here.
Hi, how are you going?
I'm well, thank you. I'm a little bit sleepy today, and I can always tell by looking at my eyes. My eyes look tired when I look at my picture here. But other than that, I'm very well. And how are you?
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. It's lovely to be here. So thank you for having me here tonight.
It's a real pleasure. Yeah, thank you for gifting your time and your experience, which I'm sure will be useful and enlightening to various folks. So first of all, I have a couple of standard questions that I ask all my guests. So first of all, what are your passions, Llana? What do you love?
Okay, my passions are health and fitness, regular gym junkie, and nutrition. Obviously, I found over the years that nutrition has a lot of impact on my well-being. So I'm sort of very conscious of what I'm eating, and also just generally, my health on all levels: mental, physical, emotional, spiritual. So very much into the spiritual and self-development, personal development, and being a better person than I was yesterday. So yes, all of that. Love it.
Yeah, me too. Great stuff. And it's interesting, isn't it, how the holistic health really impacts. It's all connected. And you said about what you eat. I know personally that I can feel a lot better if I've been eating a lot better, and can feel pretty sluggish and down if I've been overindulging in not very helpful foods. Is that the same for yourself? Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Sugar is a killer.
Yes.
So the other standard question is around the pandemic. So how have you been coping with new way of being, and how has the pandemic affected you where you are in Australia there,
Yeah,
Llana?
the pandemic's interesting. I live in far north Queensland in Cairns, so currently we don't have any restrictions and life appears to be quite usual. I don't like to use the word normal. So not a lot on the surface has changed, but listening to news reports and hearing about the pandemic in other states and lockdowns and what have you really just challenge the way I see the world. So yeah, it's interesting because on one level it doesn't appear to be changed, but on level there is, and I haven't really integrated it. So I don't know how else to explain it. So it's just very and it's not something I'd ever thought you'd ever deal with in this lifetime either. So yeah.
So maybe it takes some time to kind of get used to and embed what these changes mean and what it means for us personally and collectively.
Yeah, true.
It's a biggie. Yes. Okay. So, is there anything else you want to say around yourself by way of introduction, or should we just kind of get into the topic today?
No, let's go.
Okay. So you're here to discuss the suicide of your brother. So he ended his own life. Was it around 3 years ago?
Yeah, April 2017. Yeah, Easter Sunday. Yeah.
So getting on for 3.5 years ago. So, yeah, do you want to just kind of talk through maybe just perhaps a bit of background around it, and then talk about how it affected you? Is that okay?
Okay. So it was Easter Sunday, and I live in a beautiful little community where our neighbours get together every Easter Sunday as one of our events, and I was hosting this particular year. So I remember, it was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the morning, Easter Sunday, and neighbours had started arriving and bringing in their plates of food to share. And I got this phone call, and it was from my mum. And she just, I remember her telling me that Nathan had died and that he'd hung himself. And at that point in time, I screamed, and thankfully there was a neighbour walking in who was able to pick me up off the floor. And another neighbour who is quite, I don't know how to explain her, quite sensitive to that. So she was quite able to manage the other neighbours that had started arriving and was able to redirect them away from my house. And, I'm not sure what was shared, but they obviously had the Easter Sunday get together at someone else's house. So they're very supportive. And then I had one neighbour sit with me. I don't have any family in Cairns. All my family are based in Brisbane or Sunshine Coast. So thankfully, this neighbour was able to sit with me for a good few hours while I just dealt with the shock. So I don't know. Sometimes the shock is, you're still triggered by that sometimes. Something will happen, catch you left of field, and you go, oh, what was that about? Oh, it's Nathan, So it's, even 3.5 years on, there are still sort of small triggers that happen and that catch you unawares. So, as I said, obviously it's nothing that you ever expect. I had seen posts on Facebook that Nathan had posted the previous night. He was listening to some really dark music, I suppose, and was posting on there, was having a party at home on his own, and I was concerned. So I did get up Easter Sunday morning and I rang him, and I went through to voicemail, but it was too late. So, also having to reconcile that was a journey, for want of better words. So that was the initial stage of receiving the news.
Yeah, so obviously a massive shock, and that sounds like that still reverberates today. There's kind of echoes of that shock and that trauma, which, like you say, can still catch you unawares. So you mentioned there that you'd seen some slightly concerning posts on Facebook the night before, and then you'd phoned him the next day, but it was too late. So was there some kind of guilt around that you hadn't noticed something or done something sooner, or did you start to blame yourself in any way?
No, I didn't start blaming myself. I did wish I had the opportunity to just talk to him prior, though after speaking to his widow, obviously there were phone calls going left, right and centre once the news had broken, and his wife had found him. So she was on the phone to me apologising, and apologising for it happening. And I just said to Mars, well, it's no one's fault, no one's blaming her. She has no guilt. It was Nathan's decision. And I took that position straight up. So it's not that I had to accept anything or work through anything. I truly believe that at the end of the day, it was his decision. So in talking to his widow, Nathan had been to a doctor, in the previous months, antidepressants, testosterone shots. And so he had some health issues, and to the point where he had been referred to a psychologist. And Nathan had told the doctor that, no, look, I'm fine. I'm good. I don't need to talk to anyone about it. So also having that piece of information, I then was able to reconcile that actually he'd made the decision and didn't want to be helped. So he'd come to that resolution. So there was nothing more that anyone could have done, I believe. So at the end of the day, it's his choice, not the choice I would have made for him, but, so I know and respect that.
Yeah. And I suppose that's the case with all people who end their life by suicide. It is a choice. We've all got that choice every day, I suppose, of whether we choose to live or not. But there is a lot of taboo around the subject of suicide, and some of the language we use around it. I don't know if it's the same in Australia, but here there's some historic language that some people use. Commit suicide, which is a hangover from when it used to be a crime, and I think that stopped about 1972. But some people still use that terminology here, which adds to the stigma of it. Is it the same in Australia? Is there still a lot of stigma around suicide?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. And the other stigma too is about it being selfish. I didn't ever take that position with Nathan. I thought, for me, selfish is focusing on my hurt rather than Nathan and the position he was in. And I can't judge him. I never walked a day in his shoes, so I can't judge his decisions. I don't understand the depth of the pain or the darkness he found himself in to make that choice. So selfish is another one that in conversations people struggle with as well, but I don't see it that way.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you've got a lot of respect and lack of judgment for Nathan's decision there. Like I say, you haven't walked a mile in his shoes, so you don't know what he was going through, but clearly he was in a lot of pain. So from talking to his widow, you've learned more around what was going on for him. Is that right?
Yeah, so we had a chat. I had the idea that I'd like to write a book at some point in time, because I started journaling when I lost Nathan, and the title was that the day my brother died, and my world fell apart. And sort of journaling and then talking to his widow, I sort of thought, well, hang on, my life is actually falling together, because in having some reflection and the space with talking to his widow about how Nathan lived his life, and some of the behaviours I recognised were as a result, or our childhood contributed to some of those behaviours. So then I started going, oh, well, how is that playing out in my life, and how is that manifesting? So what am I doing? So it enabled me the gift of reflection to take a step back and understand that, and then do things differently. So for an example is, growing up as a kid, we'd always have dinner around the dinner table, yet we never ever had those hard discussions or discussions about life where life was a bit tricky. Dad covered everything up with humour. Dad and Nathan was always in trouble as a kid, so Dad sort of didn't ever praise Nathan. I went under the radar as a kid, so I was seen as the good kid. Yet I was actually hiding, because I thought, well, Nathan's always in trouble, I'll just stay out of the picture. So from those sort of experiences, I've started my own traditions now with my children. I have two children, 11 and 13. And when they come home from their dads, we have circle time where we sit down and we have a whiffle. So whiffle, W-I-F-L-E, what I feel like expressing. So we can sit down, have an open discussion, good, bad, indifferent, what needs to change, what's working well, those sorts of things. So to give them that safe environment as they're growing up and facing their own challenges, to have a discussion with an adult, and that I didn't have. So that's why I see to a point where Nathan's suicide was a gift, you know.
So it's helped you to understand more about yourself, what you have in common with Nathan that stretches all the way back to childhood, and it's also informed your own parenting of gifting your children something that you weren't afforded yourself.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and I like that idea of having a whiffle, just expressing, you know, just giving a safe space and encouraging those around you to express what's going on for them, because I think quite often with suicide and certainly with men's mental health in general, so many men just don't talk about it because it is taboo or it's seen as weak, and having feelings, having vulnerability is seen as contrary to the image of what a man should be, strong and, you know, stiff upper lip, and we don't show emotions, we just get on with it. And I wonder if I mean, it's a bit of speculation, but do you feel that perhaps Nathan was affected by that and didn't express what was going on for him? Because of
absolutely. Yeah, without a doubt. I just, Nathan was very introspective, reflecting, you know, us growing up. So even to the point where Nathan and I really didn't have any deep and meaningful conversations either. Our family wasn't close in that respect, or it just wasn't, I suppose it wasn't role models. So we didn't do that, you know. I left Brisbane in 1994, I think. So when I was going back to Brisbane to visit, Nathan would always come around and see me when I was at Mum's, but we never even then had the opportunity as adults to sit and have time on our own and have a chat. So it just wasn't something that happened. So I do believe that he didn't ever feel that he had anyone he could go to, particularly, you know, family. So I would say that's had a huge impact on, you know, his decision. Yeah.
So I wonder if you have any kind of regrets around that of, oh gosh, I wish it had been different in our family. I wish Nathan had had that space to have a whiffle and then maybe he'd still be here today, or is that not a way of thinking that you tend to manifest?
No, I haven't. No, I've rather found the positive and then implemented it now, because I've accepted that I can't change what happened in the past. I'm going to use it as a tool to learn from and grow from, I suppose. And that's Nathan's suicide for me is really about not trying to fix the trauma. It's about learning from it and growing with it. I've accepted it's always going to be a part of me. So how can I best use it so that it didn't die in vain, and, you know, improve the lives of others through the small changes that I can make and sharing, you know, my experience with others. So I don't regret that. Would have been nice, but I don't sit in that regret space.
Yeah, that's great. So you're kind of coming from a positive, forward-thinking position of equanimity, and what can you do now to perhaps prevent this happening in future, which is great. So I wonder, are you familiar with the stages of grief, the work that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote?
No.
Okay, so there's different stages of grief around anger and regrets and denial and bargaining, and then ultimately coming to acceptance. So it feels to me like you're at acceptance now, but I wonder, did you have to go through some different stages of grieving, and were you at times angry or bargaining or in denial or anything like that?
There was only a small amount of anger, and that was when his widow moved on. She's now in a new relationship, engaged to be married, and she's now in a same-sex relationship as well. So when that all started, yes, I was angry because she gets the opportunity to move on, a new life for herself. I don't get a new brother. I'll never have, can't raise him. So that seemed unfair. I suppose I've rationalised that, you know, it is what it is, and, you know, she does deserve happiness. And whilst she has met someone else who's moving forward with her life, I really don't understand the depth of trauma she's still carrying either. So once again, like, compassionate love for her, and she needs to go and live her life the best way, she believes in. So that was probably the only angry part that I've really experienced in relation to the journey.
Okay. Yeah, it's hard, isn't it, with grief, because I don't think grief is anything you ever get over. I think it's a case of coming to terms with it, or being able to cope with it better and have more resilience. But it's always there, like you say. Sometimes you can be taken unawares. So do you feel that your grief is kind of with you all the time, or does it just pop in and out?
Pops in and out. Yeah, I think it depends. So yeah, it pops in and out. I think it depends on what's going on in my life emotionally as well. One of my beautiful neighbours on Nathan's first year anniversary brought me a rose plant. So, if I'm having a tough time, I'll go out and sit there and have a cup of tea with Nathan and talk to this rose bush. So that helps me feel close to him. And then, as I said, really just depends what's going on, because you can be triggered. I've been sitting at a set of lights, and there's an ambulance comes screaming down the left-hand side with its sirens on and what have you, and it just broke out in tears. And you think, what's that about? It's like, Nathan, they would have had sent an ambulance out to Nathan, so there's a connection there. So I think having the ability to process that, understand what it is, acknowledging it, and then it's okay. Your grief's not linear. It's a mess. There are good days, bad days. I think having understanding that it's not linear, and just and be gentle with myself. It's like, okay, I'm a bit emotional today, and that's all right. So we'll get through this another day. Yeah. So self-care has been important.
Yeah, of course. And if I may ask, feel free not to answer this question if you don't want to, but I wonder how it has affected your children losing their uncle. Are you still with me, Llana?
Yeah, I'm here now. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I think we've got a bit of a dodgy connection. So I don't know if you heard the question or not, but I wonder how it affected your children, how you perhaps raised it with them, how it's affected them.
Yep. I've lived away from home. So my children were born in Cairns, and so Nathan, we didn't really visit that often. So they did have a close relationship with Nathan. So at the time, though, obviously the children saw me just walking around the house crying, and I explained to them that, Nathan had died, and that he had died by suicide. And that's as much information as I gave them. So I explained that suicide is when someone takes their own life. I didn't go into how he did it, or how by what other means people can take their lives. They were concerned. As I said, I was walking around the house crying at the drop of a hat, or just preparing dinner with tears streaming down my face. They were quite compassionate, and I just said to them, that I was sad and upset, and that this is okay. This is all part of the process, and learning to accept that Nathan's no longer here. So quite openly shared my emotions, and tried to give them some context. So I think they coped with that okay. And now that, a few years on, my son is at high school, and we get letters home that, some students have suicided. So it's now becoming very widely known, I suppose, or information is shared that students are suiciding. So hopefully the experience I had with, my 13-year-old before he got to high school helped build his resilience.
Yeah, it's always tough, isn't it, when we're affected by that. There was someone at my children's school The same thing happened to him a few years ago, and it affected the whole community, the whole of the school and the whole of the wider community. It's a tragedy, and I suppose we can look upon every suicide as a preventable tragedy. But so often there's stuff going on for that person that just isn't known to the outside world. And that's why I think talking about it in this way can help to remove the stigma, to make it less taboo around the topic of suicide, and hopefully get people talking more about it.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned when we spoke last week, Llana, that you kind of felt closer to Nathan after you've learnt more about him following his death, and you still have some unanswered questions, but you also got some kind of links back to childhood around self-awareness about parallel behaviours and such like. Do you want to speak a bit about that?
Yep. Yep. When I went to, because I was in Cairns and dealing with all these phone calls, I jumped on a plane and went to Brisbane. It was very difficult to be so far away in those early days. And I remember being in the car with Nathan's widow and Nathan's two boys, and we were driving around, and his widow was just, I suppose she was sharing and externally processing. And as she was sharing information with me, I remember being in the car and thinking, well, this is her perception and her perception of what happened. Nathan may have a different input. So I have these questions. I'm never going to get the answers that I was looking for. So very early on, I just accepted, but I'm not going to get the answers, and just moved on and to be a support for his widow and his family. And yeah, so I didn't have that tussle, I suppose. It's still difficult to reconcile the suicide, because being me in a rational space, to do something so irrational, was difficult. But I gave up on asking questions or getting answers to my questions. So I accept that that's something that I just live with now. And then, the parallel behaviours, as I was explaining, so, not being able to talk to anyone. Nathan was a hoarder. So they were renting this house, had a 3-bay car garage that was full of stuff. And then I think from memory had 2 garden sheds out in his yard full of stuff that he just hoarded. Because as children, if you put anything down for 5 minutes, my mother would come through, clean it up, throw it out. So that, for me, has manifested in not having boundaries and lacking trust. And for Nathan, it was about hoarding and keeping on to his belongings and not letting anything go, not letting it physically, emotionally. So that's sort of some of the manifestations of those things.
So it's interesting, isn't it, how you've both chosen defense mechanisms, I suppose, which are hangovers from childhood around the parenting that you received, without any blame on your parents. We all come up with strategies, don't we? And I suppose following Nathan's death, you've discovered more about the strategies that he was using to defend against those childhood experiences. So do you feel like you kind of understand more? You've been brought closer to Nathan from learning these things about him?
Yeah, I do. So which then, I have more compassion and more empathy for him. Having that deeper understanding. That's why I don't have any anger and honor and respect his choice now that I have that sort of deeper understanding, can hold that space for him.
Yeah. So I suppose it's still relatively recently. It's just under 3.5 years ago. Do you still feel that you're healing, learning, growing, accepting, or do you kind of feel that you've come to a point of peace now with Nathan's death?
Good question. I think a level of peace. Yeah. Yeah, I suppose my language, because I often talk to him, you know, as if things are going on, I just, you know, talk to him and ask him questions and that sort of thing. So I think there's less of the trying to understand and more of the peace and, yeah, just through talking to him and getting him to support me now that I'm here, still dealing with the family dynamics and whatnot. So, no, I'd say, yeah, a sense of peace.
Mm-hmm. And I like what you said, Llana, about talking to him. You go out to the bush and still connect with him in that way. So even if he's not here in person, maybe you believe you can connect to him spiritually, whether that's a kind of direct connection or just something that helps you. It's good to have that dialogue now.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so is there anything that you'd like to offer, Llana, around if there's anyone else out there watching who has experienced a suicide in their close family, or any tips about how to manage that or get over those different stages of grief that people experience?
I think reach out for some support, self-care. Yeah, I think just being gentle with yourself and understanding that, you know, yeah, you will be caught unawares with your grief and you may be blindsided. So, you know, when that does happen, just to be gentle with yourself, self-care, find your support network so that you can rely on and just ring at any point in time of the day. Say, look, I'm having a moment. I need to talk to someone, or I just need a hug or what have you. So your support network's really important. And I think also just letting, you know, my work colleagues know. So I know in the early days, I would just have to get up and walk away from my desk, and there was no questions asked. It was like, okay, Llana needs a moment. So I think including those type of people as well, they're also your support network. So they would be my tips.
Thank you for that. And yeah, I wonder if you could offer anything as well, if there is anyone watching who is feeling suicidal, is on that suicide continuum themselves, whether it's just having some vague thoughts or actually starting to seriously consider suicide, or even making a plan and having the means to take their own life. Is there anything that you'd say to them?
I would just say that, you know, you've gotten through 100% of your bad days up until this point. I know, whilst I haven't walked in their shoes, and I could only sort of begin to comprehend what they may be dealing with, it's just to have some hope and that things can improve, and just to hold on to that hope, to live another day. If that's, you know, the space you're in is just to hold on for another hour. If you've got to do it hour by hour, you know, there is a future, even though that may not be evident at this point in time. Yeah, I think, yeah, relating back to my own journey, you know, when things are tough, I know personally sometimes think there is no other option or no other way to deal with things, but you manage to get through, and it is tough. I wouldn't minimize that at all. So other than that, I'm not sure what else to suggest.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, that's all heartfelt words, and I suppose for me, I'll just add, to pick up on what you said, Llana, there is always hope. There is always hope, and I think quite often people who die by suicide, they want a part of themselves to die, but there is almost always, I think, a part of them that still wants to live. So hanging on to that hope, and also reaching out to finding someone to talk to, and you know, again, as I say, I really respect you coming on here, Llana, and talking about this difficult topic, especially when it's so close to home. But I think the more we can do this, the more we can break down the taboo and stigma around suicide and hopefully get people speaking around their mental health more openly, as you do with your whiffle sessions, which I really like the sound of.
Yeah.
Okay, so to end on a positive note, we titled this talk "Finding Life After Suicide." So, do you want to perhaps just end on what positive things are in your life now that perhaps might not have been had it not for Nathan taking his own life?
I think I understand myself. I understand myself a little better now, so that I can understand and accept myself. I have a better understanding of my childhood and how my behaviours have been impacted by that. And obviously, the gift of my experiences I can share with my children, and to improve their self-awareness and provide safe spaces for them to open up and be supported and know that, life can be a bit messy, but it's okay as well, and it's having that love and support around us that, we can tackle anything. So that would be my takeaways. Lovely.
That's a nice place to end. Thank you very much for that. Okay, well, that's been really inspiring and touching that you've shared that with us. So thank you very much once again, Llana, for your time and sharing your story. And yeah, that's great. So anything else you want to bring, or shall we call it a day there?
No, I think we'll call it a day. Thank you.
That's great. Lovely. Well, thank you very much for being with us, Llana, and take care of yourself.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye. Sorry for the slightly dodgy connection there. Maybe they're running out of Wi-Fi in Australia. Who knows? But hopefully you found that useful, and it's one of those taboo topics which we don't speak about very much. So yeah, anything you can do, have whiffle sessions with those people around you. What I feel like expressing, I might use that one with my own children. So do please share the group with your wider network, and invite anyone in who you feel might benefit from being in Pathlight Thrive Hive. And if you'd like to help make it sustainable, that would be much appreciated. Thank you to all the people who have subscribed and donated so far. You can do so at buymeacoffee.com/thrivehive. And that's it. So tomorrow is Tuesday, so 6 p.m. tomorrow. If you are a man and you want to talk about anything at all, whether you've been having any suicidal thoughts yourself, or you just want to talk about life, have a whiffle session, what you feel like expressing, then come along to Man Tuesday. The link to the Zoom session is on the Hive, and everyone is welcome. And then after that, I think the next thing we've got going on live is on Friday, which is Steve and Jaffa with their Tools for Living Your Life book club on Saturday, and Singer Size on Sunday. So thanks for being with us, and hope to see you soon. Take care.